Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 5 Ways to Fix Your Resume, brought to you by your Vanderbilt Alumni Association. I'm Sarah Whitney Anderson, Assistant Director of Alumni and Student Engagement, and I'm so glad you could join us from wherever you are this afternoon. Today's webinar will last around 45 minutes with time at the end for questions. Please feel free to type those questions as you have them in the box on the side panel of your screen throughout the presentation, and we will make sure that they are addressed in some way before time is up. We will also be recording today's webinar and post them on our webpage on VU Connect, and we will share the recording with you via email. Many of you know our presenter today from previous alumni career offerings here at Vanderbilt, and I'm excited she's back with us for this presentation. Hallie Crawford, an alumna of Vanderbilt, is a certified career coach based in Atlanta, Georgia. Her company, HallieCrawford.com, and team of coaches have helped thousands of people nationwide uncover their dream career and make it a reality. Hallie is a regularly featured career expert in the media, including Forbes.com, The Wall Street Journal, CNN, AJC, and Fox News. I'm excited to now turn this afternoon's presentation over to Hallie.
Thanks, Sarah Whitney, and thank you everyone for being here today. We greatly appreciate it, especially on your lunch hour, or probably at least a little bit close to your lunch hour. So I'm Hallie Crawford, as Sarah Whitney said, based in Atlanta, Georgia. I am a certified career coach and the founder of my own company, and I have been coaching and training for just over 19 years now. I know I might sound like I'm 12. I'm actually 46. I will not tell you what year I graduated from Vanderbilt, but you can do the math. And we are here to talk today about 5 ways to fix your resume. So let's take a look at this next slide here for a second. So the reason why we're discussing this topic is obviously and understandably, and we very much understand, that updating your resume can feel very difficult and not always the most enjoyable thing. You may feel like this woman here staring at her computer screen on the slide. It's overwhelming, and I know this because we assist our clients all day long, not just with their job search and finding their career direction, but also with updating their materials, whether it's their resume, their cover letter, and LinkedIn. And so I know and understand that it can feel very overwhelming because you might not know where to start. You might not be sure what formatting you should use. Does my resume, should I be using color or not? I've seen these text boxes on different resumes. Should I do that? You may not be sure what to include in your resume. And just by the way, your resume is not everything plus the kitchen sink or but the kitchen sink. It should be definitely a tailored document to each position you apply for. And so it can be hard to understand what to include. And some of you may feel like, because a lot of our clients feel this way, so I totally get it, you might feel like, gosh, I'm not a very good writer. So how do I do this effectively to truly market myself for each position? So that's why we're here to talk about how to get started with this in 5 specific ways to help you, get your resume up to snuff. We have been coaching and training, like I said, for just over 19 years, and we do have expert LinkedIn resume writers and cover letter writers on our team. So the advice that I'm going to give you today is advice that all of our coaches use and leverage and provide to our clients, and that our resume writers use as well to help people get started on updating their resume. And we have a very good satisfaction rate with our clients. It's 98% of the people who work with us, they're incredibly happy with the work that we do. So the advice you'll get today, my intention is for you to feel a little bit less overwhelmed about the whole thing and have specific, tangible advice to help you take some next steps to make this happen. So first of all, let's talk about why a solid, clear resume is so important. It's because of these statistics on the slide here. Statistics show that employers, and I would include recruiters in this bucket as well, they spend a maximum of like 10 to 15 seconds scanning a resume or their LinkedIn profile. It's usually both these days. In order to determine a candidate's fit before they decide to keep that resume and read further or toss it and move on to the next person. And also, an average corporate job opening, it attracts around 250 resumes. That is a ton of resumes. So you can see why standing out from the crowd, obviously, is so critically important. On the next slide here, I want you to start to think about and this is obviously, I'm sure, why you're here today. Does your resume really represent you based on these three criteria that we have here below on this slide? Does it sell you and market you effectively? Because that's one of the main criteria, obviously, to getting your foot in the door. Does it brand you effectively, though? As part of the selling yourself, it needs to brand you. They need to think of, when they think of the right employee for the position that they're hiring for, you want them to think of you because you are the expert in XYZ, whatever is relevant for that job. And finally, the third criteria is it should make you feel really confident walking into the room for that interview, and it should get you the interview in the first place. So one of the kind of side effects that I say when someone is working with one of our resume writers and in the process of updating their resume, the good thing about doing this, the positive outcome, is not just that you'll have an updated document that, sells you and brands you, but also that you should feel more confident and able to articulate what your strengths and skills are as well. So when someone goes through the process of working on their resume or their LinkedIn profile with us, for example, they feel so much better at the tail end of it because they've really given that time and thought, not just to writing down what they would say on their resume, but now they have specific language to use that they can leverage when they're networking with people, when they're conducting informational interviews, and finally, when they actually get that interview and they're, in the course of answering questions. So we want to do our first poll right out of the box here, and that is on our next slide. So Sarah Whitney, if you could get that started for us, that would be great. We want to ask the question of everybody today, does your resume really represent you based on these three criteria? So please, if you could respond to the poll, that would be great. And remember, it's these three criteria, as well as, like we said, obviously, do you feel like it would land you an interview? And we understand, obviously, the reason why you're here today, if for many of you the answer is no. And Sarah Whitney, if you could read the results for me, that would be great. I always cannot find where they are. And then when I do find them, I can't see them. I need to wear my glasses more.
Sure thing. So we have 33% with yes and 67% with no.
Okay, good. Thank you for sharing that. So one of the reasons why we ask this question, everyone, thanks for being honest about it, is for you to understand also that you're not alone, that not everyone, and a lot of people, especially when they come to us, they don't have a resume that reflects who they are as a professional effectively. It's a lot of work, and it's a pain to do this. I honestly, if it were me, I would hire a resume writer just like a lot of other people would, because it is a lot of work to get into it. So you're not alone, but that's why we're here to help you take these next steps to help you fix it. So here is our agenda on the next slide for today, 5 ways to fix your resume. We're going to talk about these 5 things to get you started in the process of updating your resume. We're going to talk about formatting, branding, having a profile summary at the top instead of an objective statement, the relevancy to the positions that you would be applying for, and finally, we're going to talk about your employment history and how to handle that effectively as well. And just by the way, as Sarah Whitney said at the beginning, this will be recorded, and you all will receive a copy of that recording. But if anyone would like also, as part of that, a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, please don't hesitate to email us at admin@HallieCrawford.com. We would be happy to share the PowerPoint with you. I totally understand if you don't want to be frantically taking notes the whole time. That might, give you a little bit of peace of mind. So admin@HallieCrawford.com, happy to share the PowerPoint as well. All right, so let's talk about the first thing to consider when you're wanting to update your resume, and that is the formatting. So here's the deal with formatting in terms of resumes, that a lot of people might think that this is the fluffy part, like, oh, well, does it really matter how it looks? The text is what really matters. But it's actually not the fluffy part. Formatting gives you an eye-catching presentation that can make a huge impression on an employer versus one that looks like everybody else's and blends in with the others, or one that has formatting inconsistencies all over it and therefore just kind of looks messy and disjointed. If your resume looks like the rest of them, it may be hard to distinguish it from everyone else, right? And you want to make sure that your resume would stand out from the pile, for example, on the person's desk or their desktop, so to speak, for the hiring manager or the human resources professional, right? And here's the deal. We see resumes with a lot of different formats these days, and some people that have implemented a lot of creative ideas here. You want to, one of kind of the rules of thumb with formatting is you want to ensure that the formatting and that your resume fits within your industry. This is one of the kind of criteria or things that you want to consider. For example, if you're in a more creative industry like marketing or graphic design, you can get a little bit more creative with it. And you can include links, for example, to examples of your work, like a website that you've created on WordPress for free that shows or demonstrates some of your creative work, okay? If you're in a more or going for a more traditional industry, if it's like banking or a law firm or something else, for example, that may be more traditional, you can stick with, and we encourage you to stick with something that is a little bit more traditional. So just as a quick reminder, we want you to consider the industry kind of first off when you're considering the formatting. But bottom line is we don't want you to discount the formatting. It is an important piece, a critical piece to having your resume stand out. Take a look at this next slide. The text is small. This is not meant for you to be able to read the text, okay? This is more about the formatting as we're talking about. And by the way, I'm happy to share any of these samples with you all. So if you'd like some of our sample resumes and cover letters that you can get some ideas about formatting and also some, ideas about how to language and write certain things, please feel free to email us, admin@halliecrawford.com. Happy to share that with you. But if you take a look at this slide in terms of formatting, this person on the top left, they have their initials there. They've used red. They've got a nice but clean text box on the left-hand side that helps their areas of expertise and their career highlights, overview and career highlights on the left-hand side. That helps certain things stand out for an employer. And I definitely would encourage you all to consider a format that includes at least a little bit of color. We don't want it to look like a circus, but one or two colors maybe, just like this one does. And consider using formatting like this, whether it's a column on the left-hand side or a text box, that pulls out some of the key bulleted items that you want a prospective employer to see. These are how, or this is how resumes look these days. They're a little bit more colorful and eye-catching, and they enable the reader to much more easily scan certain things that you want them to look at in terms of your content and your resume. And then you'll notice here as well that they've used red throughout for their header, okay, and then have page numbers as well. So this just gives you an idea of one type of formatting that you can leverage and use. So let's continue to talk about formatting here on this next slide. Some of the things that you want to make sure that you avoid, we talked about the things that you want to include, some of the color, some text boxes, some shading, that kind of thing. Things that you want to make sure that you avoid and do not do in terms of formatting is you don't want to have too many different font styles. You should have like 2 different fonts at the max. Okay, so it could be Arial. It needs to be something that, is easy to read. So personally, I like Verdana and Arial, for example. Times New Roman, personally, I think looks a little more old school, so I would avoid that. Looks more like a typewriter. But bottom line is only 2 different font styles at the max, and you don't want to have a bunch of different sizes either. The next thing that you want to avoid is making sure that you have a consistent layout, or avoid having an inconsistent layout. It needs to be clean and easy to read. And if you have a quick career highlight under one of your jobs, or a quick description or overview of what your company does or what your job entails, you need to have that for the rest of your job descriptions as well. Make sure that the formatting is consistent and the layout is consistent as well. The other problem or error that people sometimes do with their resume is they have margins that are too small. You want to have a minimum of 0.6 inches. You want to have enough white space so that your resume is, it's not just about it being visually appealing, but it's also that it's easy to read and kind of easy on the eyes, so to speak, okay? If someone gets a resume, think about if you were an employer and you get a resume that just looks cluttered and overwhelming, you're less likely to read it, and it leaves like a bad impression, for them right away after, just glancing at your resume. So you do want to make sure that it's eye-catching and easy to read. And one of the things that you do want to avoid as well is underlining. Instead, use bolding, use shading, because underlining can sometimes trip up the ATS, the computer scanning software that companies will use in order to scan your resume. So avoid underlining as well. Use instead italics in some situations, or you can use bolding in some situations as well, okay? So that's the formatting piece. So the first thing, as we said, is you want to consider, okay, what format is most appropriate for my industry, and does my current or existing formatting look kind of out of date, and can it be updated like the example we showed you just a minute ago? The second thing that you want to consider is branding, and this is critically important, as I said earlier. Branding yourself using your resume is critical as well. You need to show them who you are as a professional, what you are an expert in, and kind of paint the picture, if you will, of not just who you are, but what it would be like if they hired you and what you bring to the table. You can't just say, like this slide says here, hey, I'm good at stuff, like here are the things I'm good at. You need to paint the picture for them of what it would be like if they hired you as much as you possibly can. So I'll give you an example here on this next slide, and this is, again, talking about branding. You need to think of your resume, and this goes for LinkedIn as well, by the way, but today we're focusing on resume. Your resume is your personal marketing document. And bottom line, your name is your brand. You want your name to kind of become your brand, so to speak. So there is an example on this slide here, and I want to talk through this, and then Sarah Whitney, we'll go to the second poll here in just a moment. I'll cue you in a second, please. But this is an example of what one of our clients has on her resume. And by the way, this header she also has on her cover letter too. So you do want the heading or header for your resume and your cover letter, by the way, everyone. You want them to match so they go together and they everything's kind of seamless, if you will. So first of all, she's got her name, and this person is in a little bit more of a creative field, training and development, and so she used a circle in this square here just to kind of have her name stand out a little bit more. She's got her PhD here. If you have a PhD and it's relevant for the position that you're applying for, put it front and center like that up top. If you have an MBA and it would be relevant to the position, put it there as well. I will tell you all that if your MBA, for example, or your master's degree or your PhD, if it's not relevant for the position, and on top of that, for example, if it would make you look overqualified, don't put it there. Put it further down on your resume or leave it off completely. We had a client that we were working with once, and she said, I had my PhD on my resume for a while I was conducting my job search, and I kept getting the answer of you're overqualified. So she simply took it off. You cannot lie on your resume, of course, and that's not what we're talking about here. Your resume is supposed to be a document that sells you for that position. She explained to them when she got the interviews that she did have a PhD when it came up in conversation, and that was fine. But to have it on the resume was booting her out of the process in the first place, okay? And so she opted to remove it from her resume because bottom line, it wasn't relevant, and that is okay to do that. So I just wanted to point that out in terms of the PhD there. One of the things I did want to mention from here is a lot of times people these days will not put their actual home address, and I do recommend leaving that out. They will leave their city and state and perhaps their zip code, and that's fine, especially when you're conducting a local search. You want them to know that you're local, and especially because these days people might have, your cell phone might have a different area code from when you went to Vanderbilt or whatever it is. You want to let the employer know if you're local, you want to let them know that you are. So it is okay to leave your city and state and zip code, for example. One of the things that should be added here on this header is not just having the phone number and the email, but also you want to add your LinkedIn profile and a direct live link to your LinkedIn profile in your header, okay? Because you want them to be able to find you on LinkedIn easily and effortlessly. So that's one thing that we would add here. One of the things that I did want to mention is notice these two kind of branding statements, if you will. So these keywords, coach, facilitator, problem solver, visionary, this describes who Tiffany is. She is a coach and she facilitates, but she also helps people solve their problems during their professional development and how do I move up to the next level. And then she's got this branding statement here of empowering individuals and teams to understand their potential and maximize their contribution. You need to have some sort of short and sweet, to the point branding statement at the top of your resume and your cover letter. This helps you stand out from the crowd and helps them right away attach, this is who this person is, to who you are as a professional. It helps them understand who you are right away and starts to kind of put that out there as they're reading through the rest of your resume. So Sarah Whitney, if we could do this next poll, our next question, everyone, is how many currently have what we would call a header similar to this one, and that's on their resume that brands them effectively, that has all of these components? And we're just looking for a yes or no answer here. It's okay if you don't, which is, part of why we're here today. But I want you to start thinking about, everyone, get out your pen and paper, please. Using this example of this branding statement, what could you say about yourself to help you stand out from the crowd? So when we're ready, Sarah Whitney, if you could read me the responses, that'd be great.
Okay, so we are at 6% yes and 94% no.
Okay, so again, you're not alone. Please write down for each of you which of the pieces is missing so that you understand what you need to add to your header. One of the things I did want to mention as well is you'll notice that Tiffany has her middle initial listed here. You don't have to have your middle initial listed, that's up to you, but one of the things that you do want to do before you're finalizing your resume or when you're working on your header specifically, and this would go for LinkedIn as well, is you do want to Google yourself, because every once in a while we have had a client come to us and say, I put my middle initial on my resume and everywhere else, because when you Google my name, and this is especially if you have a more common name like Jack Black, okay, that's the best example I can think of right now, that another person may come up. And in some cases, that person may have, for example, pictures that are, unsavory on the internet, or maybe they had a criminal record. We did have an example of a client whose name was the same as someone else, and when you Googled his name, it would pull up this other person who was not him, and they actually had a record. So you do want to Google yourself to determine if you need to put your middle initial or even your full middle name, just to put it out there in terms of your resume and LinkedIn. Okay, couple of final notes on this. You want to remember, consider your resume and your cover letter, as well as LinkedIn, your personal marketing documents. You want to make sure that you're marketing your skills, your talent, and expertise, okay? And notice here with this branding statement on this person's resume, she is talking about the results. What happens as a result of these people working with her. So you want to make sure, remember, that your branding statement has a results-oriented ending, so to speak. okay? Make sure it stands out. It is okay to play with the font and color. Don't be afraid to make it larger than the rest of your content because you do want it to stand out. Reminder to match your cover letter with this and have the same header. And by the way, when you're creating your LinkedIn profile, this branding statement is what you can put under your name at the top there in that heading section as well, okay? You want to make sure that you're adding keywords to describe who you are. And if you have a lot of experience under your belt, you want to make sure that your branding statement, you can also add in here, empowering individuals and teams for X number of years to maximize their contribution. If that's part of what the prospective employer is looking for, is someone who has a lot of and long-term experience, you can add that as well. By the way, this branding statement is similar, if anyone is thinking this, to what you might say in an elevator pitch about the results that you achieve for people or organizations, okay? So let's move to tip number 3. And this piece is your profile summary, okay? Your summary statement at the top is your summary that goes at the very top of your resume that lets a potential employer know right away who you are and what your expertise is. It's a statement at the top that outlines who you are as a professional and what you bring to the table. And it is part of the branding piece, but it's longer. It's more of a paragraph. By the way, in your summary statement, you can include your soft skills as well as hard skills, expertise, and experience. So I'm going to show you an example summary here from another client, and you'll see he's got his header at the top. He needs to add his LinkedIn profile here, and I would say with this example, we could add a little bit of color too. So with this one, you can see marketing and communication strategist, and then he's got, his 3 kind of keywords here. And his summary, what we're talking about right now, are these 4 bullet points. You want to have a summary. It can either be in a bulleted format like this, or you can create it as a paragraph. But you want to have this stand out, articulating and talking about what your experience is, what the results are that you have achieved, delivering insightful presentations and strengthening relationships. So you'll notice here that a lot of this is tangible expertise and hard skills, if you will, that this person has, but it's also some soft skills as well, encouraging, teams to meet aggressive performance metrics, etc. So don't forget to include in your summary leadership strengths that you have, change management strengths, some of those softer things that are also critically important to employers. And then you'll also notice below his summary that he's got his list of key qualifications and strengths, so that a prospective employer or hiring manager can also scan quickly through the things that he possesses, the strengths that he has, that he brings to the table for this specific position. One of the things you want to consider when you're creating your summary statement, everyone, and also your bullet points, similar to this, and by the way, this is a lot of bullet points in my opinion. I would honestly cut these in half a little bit more just to make it a little bit easier to read and get to the point more. However, it's critically important to make sure that when you're working on these, that you have everything in order of priority. So strategic partnerships, for example, and strategic tactical marketing, those should be 2 of the first things that an employer wants to have for the particular positions that he's applying for. You don't want to put, for example, social media marketing up front if that's either not very relevant to the job, or if it's not relevant at all, it shouldn't be on your list. So make sure also that these are in order of priority, okay? So take a look at this summary, jot down the things that you need to add there, whether it's your key qualifications or coming up with your summary statement, okay? You want, by the way, kind of a final note here, and then we'll keep going, is you don't want this bottom list here to be redundant from what you've said above. You want these to be different keywords that you pull out of your past experience that are not just flat out redundant for what's above. It should be supporting your statements above, okay? So just really quickly, as a reminder, and then we'll keep going with the profile summary for one more slide here. If any of you would like the cover letter or resume examples, happy to share those with you. Just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. Happy to email those to you, okay? So when you're working on your profile summary, just as a quick reminder, your summary should answer these 3 questions. Why should I read this? Why should I read further down into this person's resume? Why is it worth doing so? Okay. What skills you bring to the table? Make sure that you have listed all of them. Go line by line with the job description itself. Print both out. Print out your resume, print out the job description, and before you apply, make sure everything matches up and you've said everything you need to line by line against the job description. And what value do you have that the employer can leverage? So you want to put yourself in the employer's shoes and imagine them asking themselves these questions. Why should I bother reading this? What skills does this person bring to the table? And what value do they have that I can use and leverage in the position that is open? Okay. By the way, we do recommend, unless you're a more recent college grad, that your education goes at the bottom of your resume. We do want you to have a summary statement versus either an objective statement, why you want their job, or education. Education will be relevant if, for example, it's a law degree or a PhD, like I said before, that is very specifically relevant. You can't get the job without it, okay? So that goes at the top. Otherwise, it does go at the bottom because you want to have your experience and your summary of qualifications first. Let's talk next about tip number 4 to updating your resume, and this is relevance. And we talked about this a little bit before at the beginning, making sure that your resume and every single thing on it that is listed is relevant to the job. Anything that is not listed, everyone, it diffuses the message. Think of it this way. As they're reading through your resume, you want them to be thinking marketing professional with this, this, and this the whole time they're reading through your resume. And if they start to see something else that's related to, let's say, social media or project management or something that is not aligned with the job, you're going to lose them. They're going to go off track and start thinking of you as something else, and you're going to lose them. So tip number 4 is to keep in mind that your resume is not one size fits all. Yes, you do have to tailor your resume to each position you apply for. Absolutely. People always ask me this, and I'm like, yes, you absolutely do. You need to make sure that you're highlighting the relevant skills and expertise and include quantifiable results for all of your skills. So the other thing that we find is that clients don't often enough include quantifiable results as much as possible. They'll have under their employment history, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, but they'll have more of a list of, okay, these are the tasks that I've performed. That doesn't matter. They want to know the results that you achieved. So make sure that you highlight the most relevant skills and expertise and include the quantifiable results for your skills. And Sarah Whitney, let's go ahead and open this next poll here if we could, because I want to talk to you about having a master copy of your resume. So here's the deal. Like we said, because you need to tailor your position or your resume to each position you're applying for, you do want to have one master copy of your resume that you do not touch, that has everything on it, that you then work from to create all of the different resumes for different positions. So our question is, does anyone on the call today have a master copy of their resume? Have they already done this? That's a master copy that they don't touch. They use this strategy or technique, if you will. And go ahead and just give us a yes or no there, please.
Just trying to wait on that 90% vote. Oh, we're almost there. Okay, so 63% said yes and 38% said no.
Yes, we got a really good answer on this one. I love that. Okay, so perfect. So everyone, please continue, the people that have this, continue that practice. By the way, if you have 2 or even maybe 3 kind of career paths that you're pursuing, let's say, or 3 different types of positions that you're pursuing, it is okay to have 3 different master resumes that you work from. There's nothing wrong with that. But for the people that don't have this, make sure that you create one master resume that has everything on it that you create from that, because then you can pick and choose the content that you need, but you won't forget anything, and it will help you stay more organized. By the way, with the quantifiable results for your skills, you do want to make sure that you have numbers wherever possible. I know that you cannot always have numbers, but as much as possible, quantify things. Tell them how many people you managed, how many projects you managed at one time. If you can't give them a percentage of success, for example, or a number of dollars raised because you're not in a development position, give them anything quantifiable as much as possible. If you improved a process at your organization which enabled senior level management to focus on business development, spell that out and say that literally on your resume. That's part of putting a quantifiable result on there. You may feel like, gosh, I don't have quantifiable results. They don't always have to be about numbers, and you don't always have to measure them exactly that way. You can speak to what those results are, and that is okay. Finally, let's talk about tip number 5, and that's how to deal with your employment history and deal with it effectively. If we take a look at the next slide, there are 3 ways to highlight your job history. There's a chronological resume, which is basically in chronological order with the most recent first, the most recent job or your current job first at the top. This resume is best when you want to highlight steady growth within the same profession or the same industry and advancements within your company or within your industry. A functional resume is better if you've jumped around job to job or different industries in the past and you want to kind of minimize that, or if you're changing industries and you want to highlight the relevant skills and experience that you've had, but they've been from different jobs, but you want to highlight them all together in one place. A functional resume focuses on skills and functions. And then there's also a hybrid resume where it's a hybrid of the chronological and functional. And again, if you want examples of any of these, feel free to email us. Happy to share those with you. Chronological resume, let's take a look at that for just a second, and then we'll talk about functional as well. So chronological resume, quick tips here. You want to summarize your position underneath the job title, basically kind of overall what your position is, and include what the scope is as well. Start your sentences with active verbs, managed, developed, created, etc. Nothing passive that kind of, doesn't lead into the sentence effectively and strongly. You want to select the top 5 to 7 accomplishments that highlight your success in that position, and ones that would be relevant, like we said. And as we talked about before, include measurable results wherever possible, as much as possible. For a functional resume, some of the basics would be that you would list your work history instead of talking about all of them underneath. So listing your title, employer, location, and dates, and that's it. List the positions that are relevant to the job that you're applying for together under a heading that would be called relevant experience. So for example, under your summary, right under that, you would have a section called relevant experience, and then below that, you would have a section called work history, and it would just have your job titles, and that's it. And then any other work history that you've had that wouldn't be as relevant of experience, you could put that under other experience below. This is, again, going to depend on what your work history is like and how you need to manage that. Let's take a look at the hybrid resume and some of the basics here. You want to keep the sections of a chronological resume, okay? But you want to use bullets a little bit more to highlight your skills. And again, if anyone wants an example of this to get a clear sense of what we're talking about, feel free to email us. These are some examples of what the bullets could look like, though, to highlight your skills. So you would have the same sections as a chronological resume, but you would make sure that at the very beginning you have bullet points that explain what the most relevant strengths and experiences are that would go for that job. If anyone feels like, just by the way, they would like to talk this through a little bit with me, whether it's this or LinkedIn or anything else, happy to do a complimentary strategy session with you to talk a little bit more about what type of resume you should create for yourself and how to organize it effectively. Happy to do that with anyone. Just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. And then finally, with your employment history, talking about hybrid resume again, with your experience section, what you would do with a hybrid resume is you would lump your experience into skill sets and use cumulative dates, as you see on the example here, okay? So this is another way that you can set up and use or leverage the hybrid resume template, if you will. And Sarah Whitney, I'm aware that we are close to 45 minutes into it. I'm going to wrap up in just a second, everyone, and I will be able to stay on for a couple minutes longer in order to answer some quick questions as well. Just wanted you to know. All right, so one of the things I wanted to mention too before we start to close out and go ahead and start to enter any questions you have, by the way, everyone in the chat box, and Sarah Whitney will help kind of field through those. As a thank you for being here today on our webinar and for your time. If anyone is like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming, I would like someone else to help me with my resume or LinkedIn, happy to allow you to have $20 off our services for LinkedIn or resume. Just mention that when you email me to set up a time to chat about it. I'm happy to give you kind of that coupon, if you will. Okay, so I'm going to go through these slides here quickly. And like I said, we're happy to share the PowerPoint with you. These are just some samples of the resume that we shared with you before. And one final note before we get to Q&A, you want to make sure that you always proofread your resume and you have someone else take a look at it, because I promise you there will be things that you'll miss that someone else will catch. We recommend using a 12-point font. My resume writers say that Times New Roman is okay. If that's your favorite, okay, fine. It's not my personal favorite, as I said before. Arial or Garamond, those are some two other good fonts. Printed on high quality paper when you're going in for the interview. And as we said before, you want to make sure the cover letter should have the same formatting, header and otherwise. One of the things that we wanted to mention just really briefly is for anyone that needs to get help with defining their career direction in the first place. If they're like, gosh, I don't know how to format my resume yet because I'm not even sure what jobs I need to apply for. I'm kind of all over the place. We do have our next Define Your Career Direction 4-session webinar program. It is only for Vanderbilt alumni or friends of Vanderbilt alumni or family. It's a 4-session webinar program. It begins next week, September 18th. This is a fantastic program. We get rave reviews on it. It is a very good blend of interactive coaching. It's not just, a lecture style, and it also gives you individual support with me as well. This is for people who need to really narrow down and clarify their career direction specifically. If you feel like you're not sure what your next step should be. And you can just email me at admin@halliecrawford.com. Happy to chat with you about that for more information, okay? All right, so let's get to the Q&A here. Here are some fun facts about why a resume is important, that it will help you get by the tracking systems that companies use. Social media, remember LinkedIn is critically important as well, because employers and recruiters will find you on LinkedIn to reach out to you for an interview. And remember that only about 5 applicants actually earn an interview from hundreds of applications. And this is part of why your resume and your LinkedIn is so critical. All right, so thanks for your time, everyone, today so far. Sarah Whitney, do we have any questions?
My goodness, do we? All right, so the first question is, can you speak a little to those who are re-entering the workforce after taking some time away?
Sure. So what I would recommend is that you put something there, what you have been doing. So if you've done any volunteer work, if you've managed any projects at home, like maybe a home renovation or something like that, I would try to find and identify something that you can put down versus nothing. And if you haven't done anything like taken any classes or anything else, I would actually start signing up for some classes that you're taking either on lynda.com or a certification that would be relevant or something so that you can list something on there versus just having that gap.
Great. Next question. What are your thoughts about including personal interests on a resume? Example, hiking or yoga. I've heard mixed guidance.
I tend to like that as long as it's short and sweet at the end and it doesn't take away or take up space that you need for something else that would be more relevant to the job. So my preference is yes with those criteria I just said, though.
Is it okay if resumes are more than one page?
Yes. So typically, one-page resumes are for a more recent college grad, like just within the two years out, for example. Some industries prefer one-page resumes, but honestly, all of our clients who have been out of college for more than 2 years, regardless of the industry, they've got a 2 or 3 page resume, and that's completely fine, and it's actually acceptable in what employers look for.
What's the best way to address a gap in employment due to having children?
Similar or same as question above, where in your cover letter you can say, I took a sabbatical to take care of my family and raise my kids, and here is what I'm looking to do now, and here's why. Want to re-enter the workforce and leverage this many years of experience and the expertise I had developed before, blah, 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 to get back into the workforce. And then for the resume itself, same answer as before, whatever you have been doing. If you can come up with anything in that time, that's what you put on your resume.
All right, next question. When branding, if you use your title, such as PhD on your LinkedIn, should not match on all resumes.
Should it match, or say it again?
When branding, if you use your title, such as PhD on your LinkedIn, should it not match on all your resumes?
No, if you've got your PhD title on your LinkedIn profile at the top, but the job that you're applying for wouldn't require the PhD or it would make you look overqualified, no, you can leave it off. That's totally fine. Oh, and by the way, for the other people, the gap in the resume, wanted to say one other quick thing. This is where a hybrid of the functional and chronological could come in handy. Or just having a functional resume, because then the gap in employment is going to be a little less prominent.
Great. Well, we have a couple more coming in, so take breath.
Yeah.
Many companies today require applicants to apply via company's internet portal. Does this change anything about the best practices regarding a resume or cover letter or even LinkedIn document?
LinkedIn, no, because you're not submitting your LinkedIn, you would just put your link in there if anything else. It does change in that if you have a highly formatted resume with text boxes and the things that I showed you, you do need to have a version of your resume that doesn't have those. It's just plain text where you can copy and paste more easily, and it doesn't get all wonky inside of the application, the software online on the web page that you're applying for. So you need to have your fancy, pretty resume, but you also need to have one that is plain text that you can simply copy and paste, and you don't have to sit there and massage the formatting all day long.
What age triggers on a resume should we avoid?
Age triggers on a resume to avoid. So in some cases, you can leave off your date of graduation from Vanderbilt, or if you got, another degree, you can leave that off. And the thing with the age thing is also you can leave off anything more than 10 years in terms of work experience. You don't need to put it on there. And you can actually shorten that a little bit to deal with the possible ageism issue as well, and not have things that were, longer than 8 years, for example. As much as you possibly can, though, try to tout your age as an asset and talk about why your experience is an asset. Because at the end of the day, yes, there are things you can do to kind of hide it, but you also want to be confident in, what you bring to the table as a result of your experience. So it's kind of a catch-22 a little bit and a two-way street, but those are some ideas to kind of deal with that.
If they are currently earning a master's degree, should they still put the education at the end?
Yes, unless that master's degree is like a bottom line criteria, similar to what I said in the presentation. If it's a bottom line criteria to getting the job, and you would say, in process, or you would just say, master's program in blah, 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 graduation, and then you put the month and the year. So it goes at the top if it's relevant. Otherwise, just put it at the bottom.
Great. This is the last one that's come in, so if there's any more questions, make sure to get them in very quickly. But right now, this question, when using a functional resume, should you specifically match the highlighted skills to the ones you've identified in your profile summary?
Yes, they need to be supporting of that, and you need to talk about results that would support what you have said in your summary, absolutely, because that then provides the evidence that you're not just saying all of this, here are the results that demonstrate and support it. And by the way, if anyone else has questions too that they think of after today, don't hesitate to email me. I'm happy to answer things via email as well, just to take the pressure off a little bit too. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Well, we actually did not get any more questions. So thank you so much, Hallie. Really, I learned so much today. I was definitely going through my resume as we were listening to this. But I love your wisdom and your encouragement as always. And thank you to all of our attendees for participating this afternoon. I want to encourage everyone again to check out all the career resources and events, both electronic and in person, provided to you by your Vanderbilt Alumni Association. As Hallie mentioned, the Commodore Career Intensive will begin next week, so sign up as soon as you can on VU Connect. I will send a follow-up email with the archived webinar, a request for feedback, and I will include the Career Intensive registration. We are always looking to improve upon our offerings for alumni, so please be in touch and let me know how we can best support you. Thanks again for joining, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye-bye.